faithfully delivering value and interpreting great books worldwide. Hello, this is Sally's Book Talk. Today we're exploring the novel Lolita, subtitled Confessions of a White Widower. Now, when people hear the word Lolita, many picture a specific anime-style young girl image in fashion, or the Lolita complex among otaku guys. However, this word has gained multiple cultural layers today. Tracing back, it originates from a shocking American novel about a middle-aged man's obsessive infatuation with a 14-year-old girl named Lolita. Lolita's author, Vladimir Nabokov, was born in 1899 at the century's turn, a genuine Russian nobleman. He showed exceptional language and literary talent from childhood, fluent in Russian and French. By age 17, he published a poetry collection. At 23, Nabokov's father was assassinated, forcing him into exile in Europe, and he eventually immigrated to America. In 1955, Nabokov finished the Lolita manuscript in America, but 4 U.S. publishers rejected it. Helplessly, he took the manuscript to France for publication. Unexpectedly, Lolita became hugely popular in Paris. Then, New York booksellers rushed to catch the wave, bringing Nabokov into the American literary spotlight. The once published Lolita hit #1 on the New York Times bestseller list, sparking a Lolita frenzy. In 1962, Stanley Kubrick, director of The Shining, adapted Lolita for the big screen. But when this film reached China, it was titled An Old Man's Passion for a Young Girl. Nabokov himself won the Oscar for Best Adapted Screenplay that year. British writer Graham Greene hailed Lolita as 1955's best novel. However, protests from all sides were constant. Its rebellious themes and controversial characters made critics call it a scandalous porn novel, even banned at times. So, what story does Lolita actually tell? The novel's opening line is, "Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul." This opening reveals my obsession, fear, guilt, and worship of Lolita. To put it bluntly, this sentence translates to, I am Lolita's believer, slave, prisoner, and servant. So who exactly is this I? Actually, it's Humbert Humbert, the White Widower from the subtitle. Humbert comes from a noble European family, is 40 years old, a literature professor. He had a childhood sweetheart, also his secret first love, Annabelle. However, Annabelle died before reaching adulthood, leaving Humbert's childhood emotions unfulfilled, causing him to seek Annabelle's shadow in other women throughout his adulthood. In Europe, he sought prostitutes and married a wife who liked to imitate little girls, but none could satisfy Humbert's desire for nymphets. And Humbert suffered from his desires, even staying in a sanatorium, until his uncle in America died, notifying him to inherit the estate. Humbert finally divorced and left heartbroken Europe alone, setting foot on American soil. In a small town's villa garden, he met the young girl Lolita, the only daughter of the widow Mrs. Hayes. 14 years old, he fell in love with Lolita at first sight and recorded daily details of spying on her in his diary. From Lolita's behavior, she not only tacitly allowed this, but even subtly seduced Humbert. She would wear a swimsuit and press close to his body. She let him look at the newspaper in her hands, allowed him to lick sand out of her eyes with his tongue, stroke her legs, and even before being sent to summer camp by her mother, she rushed into Humbert's room, threw herself into his arms, kissed his lips, clearly showing her affection for him. To possess Lolita, Humbert suppressed his disgust and tricked the widow, Mrs. Hayes, into marrying him. Unexpectedly, she discovered the secret hidden in his diary before their honeymoon trip, and in agitation was hit by a speeding car. After Mrs. Hayes's death, Humbert took Lolita on a 2-year-long road trip. Cunning Humbert cleverly disguised himself as a gentleman seduced by Lolita, having relations with her, masking his misdeeds as her stepfather. They hid in motels, traveling across famous American landmarks. However, during the journey, a playwright named Quilty tricked Lolita away under the pretense of making a movie. Humbert retraced his steps but found no trace of Lolita. Years later, Humbert received a letter from Lolita saying she had married and was pregnant, wed to a disabled American soldier, living hand to mouth. She needed money to move with her husband to Alaska for work. When they reunited, though, Lolita had become the financially struggling, haggard, and bloated Mrs. Schiller. Humbert still begged her to return to him, but Lolita refused. After leaving money for Lolita, he left her, got back in the car with a gun, this time seeking revenge. Humbert believed his feelings for Lolita were genuine, while Quilty was the true villain who ruined her life. So he tracked down Quilty alone and shot him dead. Humbert was then imprisoned for murder, sentenced to death. In jail, he wrote Confessions of a White Widower and soon died of tuberculosis, ending the novel. Many critics considered Lolita a pornographic novel, mixing incest and crime of passion. But erotic elements don't automatically make a work vulgar pornography. The Bible also depicts incest and lust, but its purpose is to warn believers. Similarly, The Plum in the Golden Vase is often stigmatized as erotic fiction. Actually, it contains minimal sexual content, focusing more on societal corruption and historical realism. The sexual scenes in Madame Bovary stem from Flaubert's deliberately restrained writing approach. It strives to show how a woman is destroyed by romantic idealism and a materialistic society. Precisely such controversial works challenge aesthetic norms, broaden cultural tolerance, and deepen our understanding of humanity. Moreover, Lolita contains no explicit sex scenes. In his 1957 Afterword, Nabokov mockingly wrote that techniques like Humbert's inserted diary misled readers into expecting pornography, causing them to abandon the book when none materialized. As Thomas Foster wrote in How to Read a Novel, from its first sentence, a novel tells us how it wants to be read and hints at what we might discover. The opening of Lolita features a psychiatrist, Dr. John Ray Jr.'s preface and introduction. He's completely unrelated to the plot. Humbert entrusted his diary and confession to him before dying. Essentially, Dr. Ray serves as the novel's editor, a seemingly objective commentator within the story. Nabokov uses Dr. Ray as a mouthpiece to address readers. Dr. Ray writes there isn't a single obscene word in the entire work. Scenes perceived as erotic are vital devices driving this tragic narrative. He condemns Humbert as morally corrupt and defines the subsequent text as a case study. He states that as a case study, Lolita will undoubtedly become a psychiatric classic. As artwork, it transcends redemption to deliver moral lessons. Thus, the novel doesn't depict eroticism to incite lust. On the contrary, those scenes are indispensable to this psychiatric case report. Each of Humbert's indulgences pushes him and Lolita deeper toward damnation. Serious readers grasp its inherent tragedy. So why did Nabokov write such an American girl's tragedy? To answer, we must first examine Lolita's character. Lolita is among contemporary American literature's most distinctive female figures. Oxford Dictionary even includes Lolita, defined as a precociously seductive girl attracting older men. In Nabokov's writing, Lolita is both adorable and detestable, precocious yet willful. She knows she's cute, but mindlessly mimics celebrities' clumsy flirtations. She deliberately seduces Humbert, the man her mother likes, knowing her mother longs to remarry. She had sexual experience young. Even her first encounter with Humbert was initiated by her. Though physically precocious, Lolita remains psychologically naive. She likes Humbert merely because he resembles a movie star. Learning of her mother's death, she first broke down, but soon compromised under Humbert's coercion, even intensifying her self-indulgence by trading her body for his material rewards. Later, she colluded with Quilty to escape, not nobly, but ignorantly believing he'd make her an actress, oblivious to his pornographic background. Such reckless willfulness naturally exacted a price. Lolita, who ran away again, married a disabled American soldier, lived hand to mouth, and ultimately died in childbirth. Feminist critic Patricia, only 22 at the time, once proposed this viewpoint. Generally, female characters in male authors' works often play crucial roles in their growth journeys, serving as catalysts for women's self-awareness awakening. They help women transform from passive dependence to autonomous independence. However, Nabokov's novel differs. Lolita clearly shows no growth whatsoever. Her first sexual experience came from curiosity. After tasting the forbidden fruit, she used sex as a tool to attract men and gain advantages. To escape boarding school, she chose Humbert. Later, to escape Humbert, she chose Quilty. Finally, fleeing Quilty, she hastily married. Her short life was constant escape, yet she never escaped tragedy. The tragedy and ignorance in Lolita weren't Nabokov's invention, but stemmed from deep societal roots. It's rooted in 1950s America's rampant consumerist culture, a time of rapid economic growth. But beneath surface prosperity, people were spiritually empty, craving comfort. Movies, jazz, ad-filled magazines, all consumer-driven entertainment became the perfect opiates. As Nabokov wrote, Lolita was the ideal consumer, both subject and object of ads. Sexually suggestive media subtly shaped her generation's views on sex, making them vulnerable to predators. Meanwhile, Lolita belonged to a generation raised on fast food and jazz. Even Humbert, obsessed with her, admitted Lolita lacked intelligence, always listless, dull-eyed, and idle. She blindly believed every ad or opinion in gossip magazines, worshiping materialism and money to foolish extremes. Thus, she traded her body with Humbert. Consumerism also fueled America's highway industry. Cars and highway networks gave Humbert his escape tools and possibilities. And ubiquitous motels, cheap and hidden, became virtual criminal paradises. On the family level, Lolita's father died very early. The absence of a male figure kept mother and daughter in a mutually competitive, hostile relationship. Mrs. Hayes's annoyance with Lolita was quite apparent. As a young widow, she saw her daughter as a burden while behaving frivolously herself. So when scolding Lolita for revealing clothes or misbehavior, she had no maternal authority. The rebellious girl just wanted to escape her control. Meanwhile, Mrs. Hayes was consumerism influenced, living comfortably on her husband's inheritance, yet vainly aspiring to attach herself to European nobility, putting on airs for Humbert. She tried to flaunt refined cultural taste, even calling the maid's room a little studio. Oh, but these clumsy tricks were betrayed by cheap sculptures and fake paintings in the living room. Humbert just coldly watched her affected behavior. Such a mother naturally neglected parenting. Thus, Lolita's inner world was colonized by ad-filled TV and magazines. Lolita's character was shaped by Nabokov through extensive news reports and social surveys. Molded from these sources, she became profoundly representative. Critics note two iconic 1950s American teens, Holden Caulfield from The Catcher in the Rye and Lolita. Some even call Lolita Holden's sister, speculating he wanted to protect kids like her, rebellious and homeless, in that rye field. In 1963, Nabokov told Playboy magazine, "I shall never regret creating Lolita." He said he'd spent 40 years writing about Russia and Western Europe, while Lolita was his attempt to capture America. As an immigrant writer, Nabokov naturally possessed a unique observational lens. His Humbert is both immersed in American culture and detached from it. Through Humbert, Nabokov mocks traditional gentility's hypocrisy, exposes American culture's vulgar superficiality, and punctures consumerism's manufactured utopia. Fantasy. This Playboy interview was later included in Nabokov's autobiography. But memory. In his autobiography, Nabokov refuted the one-sided erotic interpretation of Lolita. He said what he valued most in creation was the aesthetic ecstasy from literature, the spiritual joy and inner Schenzel it brings. Nabokov truly achieved this by creating Humbert, American literature's most compelling criminal storyteller. In his confession, Humbert uses masterful narrative techniques to captivate readers, distort judgment, and even make them doubt Lolita's existence. Was Humbert a heinous murderer or a pitiful victim of circumstance? Now we'll analyze the linguistic techniques in Humbert's classic opening passage. The opening line, Lolita, light of my life, fire of my loins, my sin, my soul, stabs like a burning dagger. Unforgettable. So who exactly is Lolita? Humbert immediately answers from a voyeur's perspective. She was low, plain low in the morning, standing 4 feet 10 in one sock. She was Lola in slacks. She was Dolly at school. She was Dolores on the dotted line. Through these lines, we trace Lolita's daily routine via Humbert's obsessive gaze. He casually exposes his perversion, declaring delusionally, "But in my arms, she was always Lolita. Perhaps there never was any Lolita at all. Except that one summer I fell in love with a little girl." This instantly bewilders readers. Could Humbert not even confirm Lolita's existence? Here, the author questions memory's authenticity. Through Dr. John Ray Jr.'s preface, readers learn Humbert is a pedophile obsessed with nymphets. So how reliable is a psychiatric patient's memory? Perhaps Lolita was merely his imagined creation. Just as readers grow skeptical, he casually remarks, "Rest assured, a murderer can always craft fine prose, ladies and gentlemen of the jury." Look at this chaotic, heart-wrenching confession. So this heartfelt confession actually came from a murderer's mouth. While listeners are stunned, Lolita's fate becomes more elusive as characters break the fourth wall, expressing self-doubt or addressing readers directly. This is classic postmodern technique, like movie bloopers shattering immersion, pulling us from fiction back to reality. Um, this distinguishes Nabokov from his contemporaries. Before Nabokov's era, highly praised novels reflected and contemplated social reality. But Nabokov pursued innovation in literary form and content. In Lolita, he uses a nested three-layer narrative, like Russian dolls, each with independent storytelling, yet time and space intertwine as one. The first layer is Dr. John Ray Jr.'s preface, establishing a reading contract, claiming authenticity, creating a truth-fiction blurred atmosphere. The second layer is Humbert's diary, 1945 to 1947, documenting events after moving into Mrs. Hayes's home but before abducting Lolita. The diary shows his torment between lust and morality. It also becomes the catalyst for Mrs. Hayes's death. Humbert wrote of his disgust for Mrs. Hayes and desire for Lolita. After reading it, an agitated Mrs. Hayes rushed into traffic. The third layer, the novel's core, is the widower Humbert's confession from the subtitle. Here, Humbert recounts his life chronologically, but breaks timeline to address the jury as a criminal seeking sympathy. These words are likely lies since they stem from Humbert's memory, and he repeatedly admits, "My memory is questionable." For example, Humbert describes meeting Lolita. "There was no forewarning. A blue wave surged within me as she turned half naked, kneeling on a sun-drenched meadow. It was from behind dark glasses she peered at me. The Riviera on the Mediterranean coast, Humbert's hometown, where he made beautiful memories with his first love, Annabelle." This intensely visual description was perfectly recreated in Kubrick's 1962 film adaptation. The moment he saw Lolita, the childhood version of Humbert within him awakened. Seeing Annabelle reborn in new form, Humbert merges memories. My recollection of Annabelle isn't as clear as years ago. There are two types. One with eyes open, creating mental visions with adjectives. That's how I saw Annabelle. The other, eyes closed, visually reproducing a lovely face, a radiant little sprite that was my Lolita. This complex passage reveals Annabelle exists only in Humbert's hazy memory. Our knowledge of both girls comes solely from his narrative. With no other evidence of their existence, the truth of this account remains questionable. Criminal Humbert likely fabricated this to win sympathy. Inventing Annabelle as childhood lover justified his perverse desire for Lolita. creating a seemingly romantic excuse for his crimes. Nabokov repeatedly uses Humbert for such passages, creating contradiction, tension, and reading pleasure through beautiful recollections. Readers are struck by Humbert's raw emotions. Through empathy, they pity and sympathize with him. Yet reason insists Humbert is likely lying, a pervert and murderer beyond doubt. Hearing this, some ask, why did Nabokov use such mystifying techniques? This stems from his personal literary philosophy and aesthetic preferences. Nabokov intensely emphasized expressive impact, always aiming to astonish readers. In literature classes, he'd demonstrate dramatically. In a dark room, he'd light a corner lamp, calling Pushkin Russian literature's first beacon, then a central one for Gogol, and finally another declaring Chekhov its lingering afterglow. Then he strode to the window, tore open the curtains, letting sunlight flood the classroom, and shouted, I, I, this is Tolstoy. In his writing, he also had a persistent pursuit of style and form. For example, his most acclaimed use of puns. In Lolita, he removed the space between the rapist to form a single word, therapist. When Humbert says, I'm not a child molesting pervert or rapist, I'm a therapist, it becomes brilliant irony. This emphasis on expressive effect is also tied to his love for butterflies. Nabokov was a butterfly enthusiast from childhood. He deeply studied South American eye-gray butterflies and named a new category, Lolita. In his literary lectures, Nabokov said, great writers all have masterful deception, but nature has the highest deception. Novelists just imitate nature. Each butterfly has two compound eyes, each made up of 15,000 ommatidia. They observe the world through different angles and light, like countless mirrors, each reflecting a unique image. Most ingeniously, butterflies have eye-like patterns on their wings to confuse predators. This deception inspired Nabokov to use an unreliable narrator with nested, multi-layered structures, building a labyrinthine novel. This made Nabokov a key figure in American literature's transition from modernism to postmodernism. In 1969, Nabokov received the American Academy of Arts and Letters Medal of Honor. As an immigrant writer, his reputation in American literary circles reached its peak. As he himself said in an interview with the Paris Review, I will be remembered for Lolita. All right, that concludes our interpretation of the book Lolita for you. Listening notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.